Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to a new year of conversations on agroecology. This year, we will be focusing on the 13 principles of agroecology. And if you follow us the whole year, you will get insights into each one of those principles. Today, we will be focusing on how to measure agroecology as an intro to the principles. And for this, you will get two interesting talks. I'm 𝗁𝗀𝘀𝗂𝗃𝗀𝗃, and along with my colleague 𝗁𝗂𝗀𝗀𝗃 from INIAV, Portugal, I'm pleased to moderate this conversation today. And the figure that you see now, the 13 principles, you will be seeing this figure in the beginning of all the conversations this year, and we will look into all of those principles throughout the year. My colleagues, Julia Forra-Fellner and Monica Sandra, and I represent the Austrian Agency for Health and Food Safety. Julia will be writing a summary of the conversation, and Monica is there for any technical issues that you might have during the conversation. So you can always ask Monica if you need anything. And our agroecology partnership stands for Accelerating Farming Systems Transition, Agroecology Living Labs and Research Infrastructures. So living labs and research infrastructures are in the center of this transition in this partnership. It's a collaborative research and innovation initiative that involves European Commission, 26 member states, associated countries, and third countries, currently with 72 partners, but we are also getting new members starting this year. These conversations on agroecology are one of the first steps to enhance agricultural knowledge and innovation systems, the so-called AGIS, for the agroecological transition. We aim to engage and get people connected who are actors in living labs, research infrastructures, and any organizations around those structures. We organize these conversations on a monthly basis, so always on the last Wednesday of the month between 1 and 2 o'clock Central European time. In the summer, we will take a little break. Today, we will have two presentations. The first one will be given by Nina Moeller from the University of Southern Denmark. She will explain to us why conceptual frameworks matter and how agroecological transformation can be measured. Our second speaker will be Matthias Keck from the Center for International Forestry Research and World Agroforestry. He will give you insights into a variety of tools and frameworks for assessing agroecological transitions. So you will get a very good insight in how to measure agroecology after these two talks. When the talks are done, you always have the opportunity to join the discussion. So you can send your questions in the chat or raise your hand, and we have half an hour for discussion. Before we begin, let's just shortly go through the conversation play rules. So that we will have a good technical quality. We are quite many today, so please keep your microphones muted when not speaking. And if you do not have a good connection, please keep your camera shut as well. You are very welcome to join the conversation by just raising your hand or writing your question directly in the chat. Carla and I will be taking the questions one by one in the discussion time. We respect everybody's opinions, so all questions are welcome, but please do keep them short and simple so that the speakers have time to answer. And also comments and ideas for the coming conversations are always welcome. This conversation will be recorded. I think you have all clicked on OK, but if anyone has objections, please let us know now. I hear no objections, so we are good to go. Great. And now, without further ado, I would like to hand over to Nina Moeller. Nina, the floor is yours.
That's great. Hi, everybody. Let me just get my slides up. Can you see these now? Yeah, okay, great, fantastic. So hi, yes, my name is Nina, you've already heard that, and I'm associate professor at the University of Southern Denmark, and I've got a mixed background in philosophy, anthropology, sociology, and work on food system transformations, surprise, surprise, and diverse ways of knowing and the politics that go into that. And so, yeah, I hope you'll enjoy my presentation today. The argument that I'm going to make goes something like this. So weak conceptual clarity constitutes a barrier to agroecology. Unclarity in what is meant by agroecology enables cherry picking, watering down, rebranding, and stretching the concept beyond recognition. However, I think most of you will know or agree that tight monolithic definitions are not really the way forward. Instead, we need strong multidimensional frameworks that clarify what a thorough agroecology transformation entails in a diversity of context, the diversity of geographical, socio-environmental context. Now, even if they're not generally specifically developed for that particular end, I think that assessment frameworks do more than just generate evidence on agroecological transformation or on the performance of agroecology. I think assessment frameworks are based on particular ways of understanding agroecology and therefore also create opportunities for conceptual refinement on what agroecology actually is and does and should be. And so today, to illustrate that, I will draw on the Agroecology Assessment Framework that Matthias, who is our second speaker today, and I were involved in developing, just to show how that framework does conceptual work. So how it brings transformative version of agroecology into being, conceptually at least. And all of that matters. If you don't think it matters, if you don't understand yet why it matters, I'm just saying that it matters because it's crucial to ensure that the work we do with respect to agroecological transformation of food system is actually about a paradigm shift, rather than just a minor technical adjustment to an existing system. Okay. Weak conceptual clarity constitutes a barrier to agroecology. First, it enables cherry picking. So this can lead to adopting a handful of visible practices, low conflict practices like cover crops, flower strips, reduced pesticides, all things we know from agroecology, but without addressing the deeper dynamics that often determine whether agroecological transformation is actually viable, is actually durable. All those things about land tenure, debt and insurance, market dependence, labor conditions, and so on. Second, I think it makes decisions difficult for those who actually want to support agroecology. So loads of organizations, I mean, say ministries, municipalities, NGOs, and funders particularly need to make certain choices. But if the concept of agroecology is too elastic, they cannot easily distinguish between a project that shifts trajectories and a project that produces simply marginal improvements to the conventional model. And third, it weakens accountability and learning. So if we do not share some clear reference points, then agroecological success might just become whatever is easiest to report. Conceptual weakness is hence not neutral, and when the meaning is loose, basically the concept becomes so elastic that it fits into existing priorities and constraints rather than be about a shared commitment to radical change. At the same time, the solution is not to impose a single neat definition. Agroecology has to speak across contexts, different ecologies, different farming systems, different histories of agrarian change, different struggles around land. So it's not just a technical package we can implement as a one-size-fits-all. And that's why agroecology has come to be expressed in the form of principles. And so here I'm talking about the FAO elements, the HLPE principles, the 𝗁𝗁𝗁𝗁 principles, amongst others. And all of these try to approach agroecology as a context-responsive value system that shapes landscape and material practices. And this sensitivity to plural context is a good thing. The problem only becomes when plurality becomes so permissive, that we are so open, that agroecology can mean almost anything and can include approaches that reproduce those very issues that agroecology originally emerged to actually contest. So we therefore need strong multidimensional frameworks that clarify what transformative agroecology entails. A serious framework has to do three things at once. It must make clear that transformation is multidimensional. So that means that changes need to reinforce each other across domains. It's not just enough to observe ecological change at a plot level if the surrounding system continues to penalize farmers economically, and the other way around as well. For an agroecological transformation, changes need to reinforce each other across different dimensions. Second, such a framework must also clarify the threshold between what is incremental improvement within an existing model and what counts as a shift in the model's organizing logic, right? A good framework needs to help us grasp that difference between redesign and merely optimization, or reconfiguration and merely input substitution, right? And third, it needs to remain sensitive to context, obviously. Not all principles look the same everywhere. But context sensitivity is not the same as conceptual looseness. So a good framework allows diverse pathways while still maintaining non-negotiable commitments. Assessment frameworks, and that's maybe the main point that I'm trying to make today, do not merely describe reality, they also help organize it. Once a framework is adopted, it changes what is visible, what is invisible, what is rewarded, and what is ignored. That can, of course, be dangerous too, because if a framework is narrow, it might reduce agroecology to whatever fits a spreadsheet or something, very narrow. But it's also an opportunity. It can create shared learning by giving people a tool to play around with and reflect on. It opens up for discussing disagreements. It gets people to say things like, we thought we were doing agroecology, but this dimension is weak. Why is that? What's blocking it? What would it take to strengthen it? So apart from measurement, assessment is also a structured way of doing collective sense-making. I want to bring in a very small interlude, and that is to bring the difficult to measure back onto the table. Some of the most decisive aspects of agroecological transformation resist easy indicators. But in many institutional settings, we still count, like what is real is still what is easily measurable, right? And so, there is these difficult, hard to measure dimensions of agroecology. Think of farmer autonomy, trust, reciprocity, the quality of participation, who sets the agenda, cultural resilience. These factors often determine whether agroecology endures or withers. And what this means is that assessment should create space for what is harder to measure, but central to transformation. And that's probably best done by widening what counts as evidence. And we have an upcoming project on that, actually, that is funded by the Agroecology Partnership, but I won't get into that today. So I want to talk about the Agroecology Assessment Framework, and it's going to just be a really fast run through. But yeah, if you're more interested in this at more depth, then we can, of course, also talk about that either here or at another occasion. So Matthias and I were involved in this, developing this with others. In fact, it was a whole community of practice that was made up of researchers, farmers' organizations, civil society associations, and donor institutions. And this community of practice focused on financing agroecological transformation. Here's some details on the framework, and I just want to use it as an example of how a framework can clarify what transformative agroecology entails without pretending that one pathway fits all. Okay, so this is more like thinking through what this framework does. It's not trying to promote it or say it's the best framework out there or whatever. Just trying to use that framework to show you how it can create a kind of conceptual clarity. Okay. We developed the framework to improve on existing methodologies for answering the question of how agroecological, if at all, is this project, which was a question that we needed to answer in our studies of project-based investments in agroecological transitions. We needed to do so in comparable ways, so we needed to be able to say, how agroecological is this project? In the process, we realized that our framework was more than just a tool for tracking finance flows. So it's been adopted and turned into an online tool to track finance flows by the International Agroecology Coalition, which is, of course, great. But the point is that it can also serve to do things like design and evaluate projects, develop initiatives, design calls for proposals, and so forth. So the framework is built around the HLPE's 13 principles, and it operationalizes them as continuums between business as usual and transformative practice. I'm going to jump a couple of points, but what I think is key about the project is that the framework introduces the concept of red flags, and that is a way of contributing to a radical interpretation of agroecology. I'm going to come to that in a minute. It also introduces the concept of always applicable principles. Thereby, it ensures that social justice dimension of agroecology cannot be ignored. So let's have a look at how it does that. Here are the red flags. Red flags act as necessary safeguards against the cooptation and dilution of agroecology. Red flags serve as critical markers of a kind. So they identify practices that are fundamentally incompatible with agroecological principles, such as the promotion of GMOs, the promotion of monocultures, or extractive value chains. So once they turn up in an assessment, you know that this cannot be agroecology. So let me show you how the framework is expressed as a simple rubric by this example. I will go through two principles really quickly, just to illustrate a little. So this one is on soil health. We've developed a spectrum of value statements. For soil health, the value that expresses business as usual holds that the project in question deliberately and actively preserves and enhances soil health through explicit design for improving soil biological activity and structure and preserving soil erosion. Whereas at the other end of the spectrum, we express the most, sorry, that wasn't business as usual. That was the most transformative agroecological value, of course. And the business as usual would be expressed as it does not focus on soil health and it may use practices undermining soil health, right? So in the right-hand column there you see a list of examples, a list of indicators that clarifies what kind of practices or approaches indicate a strong agroecological value. However, they don't determine the score, they just help guide the evaluation. So my point was that I wanted to show you that it's possible to mark soil health as
2 minutes now, Nina.
Yeah, thank you. That soil health can be marked as non-applicable if a project does not address the agricultural production system. For example, it was solely focused on value chains, right? Now, I want to show you that 4 principles, namely co-creation of knowledge, social values, fairness, and participation, cannot be marked as non-applicable. And what that does, we still have the same spectrum. This is fairness. It tells you business as usual in pink. It tells you highly transformative agroecology in darker green. But it allows you to say this principle, it does not allow you to say this principle is not applicable. It always has to be applicable. What that means is that the framework, you cannot decide to just keep that out of your measurement. You will have to mark this as a 0 if it doesn't address this. So this is maybe a little bit too quick, but I'm just very aware of the time. So I'm going to stop it there and rather have you ask some questions later. The scoring on the spectrum that you saw is not strictly necessary, but if you do that, you get a kind of output, a visualization of an agroecology project or whatever it might be that looks a bit like that. That's a very common thing. And so for my last minute, I'm just going to quickly say why this matters now. And very simply, if we want agroecology to be a paradigm shift rather than a technical adjustment of the existing system, we need conceptual and methodological infrastructure that keeps agroecology transformative. And I think assessment frameworks can be that. They can provide us with the opportunities to have the kind of conversations that we need to ensure that we clarify what transformative agroecology is all about. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Nina. I hope you have seen that there is a lot of clapping hands on the screen as well. You will all get the chance to ask Nina after the second presentation, so we will take the questions together today. As our second speaker, we have Matthias Geek from the Center for International Forestry Research and World Agroforestry. Matthias, without further ado, the floor is yours.
Thanks a lot. Good afternoon, everyone from Nairobi, and thanks a lot, Nina, for such a wonderful presentation. Now, I have the difficulty of speaking after you, which is a pleasure, but not easy, because you've set the scene so nicely. So, yes, I do work for 𝗁𝗿𝗀𝗀𝗃, but I'm also the coordinator of the Agroecology Transformative Partnership Platform, or TPP. And I'd like to give you a bit of an overview of what the Agroecology TPP as a multi-actor platform with numerous projects does on that topic. If you would like to engage already a bit more before we have the conversation later on, maybe you can note down a couple of thoughts that you have and experiences that you have with different tools and frameworks for assessing agroecological transitions. What do you know? What was your experiences? What did you find useful, challenging, etc.? Just to keep the conversation going also on the chat. I'm not going to go into too much detail about the background of things, but I think we're very much aware that, as is often stated, our food systems are broken. They're the major contributors to some of the major crises humanity has faced in all of its history. But I prefer to be optimistic, and I think if something is at the center of so many problems, we can also make it the center of many solutions. And the really big thing is here that climate change, biodiversity loss, triple burden of malnutrition, land and soil degradation, growing inequity, all of these things are interrelated. So as Nina was saying, we need a transformative change, and we need a systemic transformative change. And that's exactly the value proposition of agroecology. And over the course of just the last couple of years, since the publication of the 10 elements and the 13 principles of agroecology in the HLP report and by FAO respectively, the amount of recognition and evidence for how agroecology addresses all of these interrelated food systems simultaneously is growing considerably. This notwithstanding, a lot of skeptics keep asking, where is the evidence? What is the evidence that agroecology actually lives up to its promises? And I had the pleasure of working with colleagues from DG INPA, the EU, from JRC and from CIRAD on trying to bring the evidence that we currently have from reviews and meta-analyses together. And it's quite convincing that agroecology does live up to its promises. Yet there's a little caveat in this knowledge brief that we published, and that is all of these meta-analysis and reviews focus on agroecological farming practices, cover crops, crop rotation, diversification in general, agroforestry, etc. And as Nina was explaining, agroecology is much more than that. And the way we define and measure agroecology is indeed critical for shaping these agroecological transitions. And my main point, which I think you agree with, Nina, is that we need to see this as a holistic something. Whether it's the 10 elements or the 13 principles we use to structuring it, we can only assess how successful agroecology is if we define agroecology as a holistic food system approach. And there is growing evidence that when the 13 principles are systemically and coherently implemented, they make major contributions to nearly, if not all, of the Sustainable Development Goals. Now, the reason why I pulled out here SDG 17 explicitly is because food system transformation, that's quite a complex something. And also the 13 principles of agroecology at a first glance, they look pretty complex. So can we do this alone? No, we can't. We need partnerships, and we don't just need lip statements to it. We need to live partnerships like the European Agroecology Partnership does. And similarly, the Agroecology Transformative Partnership Platform on a global level was established to do exactly that. Bringing different actors, farmers, grassroots organizations, UN organizations, research organizations, civil society, donors, all together to co-create knowledge, to address critical knowledge and implementation gaps, and thereby synergistically and systemically foster and accelerate agroecological transitions. At the very core of the agroecology TPP are domains that we define as critical knowledge and implementation gaps for agroecological transitions. And today we're talking about one of those 8 domains, and that's metrics. How can we meaningfully track agroecological transitions and assess its effects? A number of projects from different partners contribute to this domain, and there's more and more knowledge products coming out. I'm not going to lead you through all of them today, obviously, but there's some cases where, as there was a question regarding the FAO tape tool in the chat, we apply existing tools like tape to generate evidence. There's other projects where we develop new projects like the CGI Agroecology Initiative and now the Multifunctional Landscape Science Program, where we've designed the holistic localized performance assessment for agroecology and applied it on nearly 2,000 farms throughout 8 countries. But there's also a lot more conceptual work on what is needed to meaningfully assess what matters and getting to the difficult points, as Nina was also explaining. So why does all of this matter? As we know, the fact that skeptics perceive that there's a limited evidence on the performance of agroecology is a key barrier for more investments and more policy and institutional support for agroecological transitions. And as Nina was saying, when we agree we want to foster agroecological transitions, then we also need to know whether or not we're doing that. So we need to understand to which degree agroecology is integrated in the respective unit that we're looking at. And very importantly, agroecology is a holistic approach for food system transformation. And therefore, it's really critical that we do not assess agri-food system performance on just a narrow set of largely economic-focused outcome indicators, but really look at the holistic food system performance that we would like to see in this paradigm shift that Nina was referring to. And very importantly, agroecology puts co-creation through transdisciplinary approaches at the very center. And therefore, I think any agroecology assessment needs to be highly participatory in its design, in its implementation, and in the interpretation and actioning upon the results. And of course, it's also a critical component of the work of the Agroecology Partnership. In my view, there are 3 general ways of understanding agroecology assessments. On the one hand, there's what Nina was explaining with the agroecology finance assessment tool, assessing the degree of agroecological integration. That can be a series of practices, but ideally should be measuring the status of the integration of the 13 principles or 10 elements. There's a number of ready-made tools available for that purpose, but agroecology is, as Nina was saying, highly context-specific, and we need to really engage in co-defining the contextual meaning of agroecology with relevant actors in doing so. Then, of course, there's a question of what is the performance of agroecology? So what is the status of agroecology's contribution to achieving societal goals? There, once again, it's important that we assess performance holistically rather than just looking at selected impact outcome indicators with a strong focus on economy. And it's really important that there's a possibility to assess the integration of agroecology and its performance simultaneously to get an understanding of how agroecology is performing. But assessing agroecological transitions, that's a whole different beast in my view, because that's a dynamic process. And yes, by longitudinal repeated assessments of the integration of agroecology and its performance, we can get towards assessing agroecological transitions. But I think it's critical that we also assess the more dynamic components, such as changes in knowledge, attitude, and practice. So for the purpose of the first one, how agroecological is something, there's a number of tools available that look specifically at that. I'm just going to lead you through a couple of them. This review article mentions a few more, but due to time, we won't be able to go through all of them. One of the first ones that was designed specifically for that purpose was BioVision's Agroecology Criteria tool, and it remains a good choice for a very quick assessment of projects and portfolios. But through the work that Nina was referring to, we've evolved ACT into the Agroecology Assessment Framework, and I would strongly recommend to use that coherently across our assessments of how agroecological projects and investments are. Then there's a big point of like how agroecological are policy environments. Here at the Agroecology TPP, together with the Agroecology Coalition and numerous members of each, we've developed a tracking tool for the implementation of the policy recommendations by the World Food Committee on the UN, the World Committee on Food Security, or CFS. So it's not looking at the 13 principles or 10 elements, it's looking at the integration and implementation of these policy recommendations. Also, through the CGI Agroecology Initiative, we have developed a policy tracker that focuses on the 13 principles, but it has been specifically designed for the use in the CGIAR initiative, and any other users would need contextualization and tweaking. Then a growing factor for agroecological transitions is how can we engage the private sector? So BioVision Foundation once again pioneered with this tool called BAC, the Business Agroecology Criteria tool, which allows for assessing private sector enterprises in a systemic yet fairly quick way to see how aligned their business model is with the 13 agroecology principles. But then, where does agroecology happen? On a large degree, that is still on the farm where food is produced. So knowing how agroecological a farm is really critical. For that, again, BioVision has a really interesting tool, the AFAC, the Farm Level Agroecology Criteria tool, but much more commonly used is FAO's TAPE tool, and the CGI Agroecology Initiative HOLPA tool is a nice complementary aspect that aims to strike the balance between what TAPE does, and that is a globally harmonized, coherent data set with the need for contextually, locally relevant evidence. Therefore, the HOLPA Holistic Localized Performance Assessment tool has global indicators that are fixed and a local indicator selection process to also make sure that local perspectives are adequately taken into account. Now let's go to the performance of agroecology. In the review article mentioned previously, we've looked at tools specifically designed for assessing the performance of agroecology, but of course there's numerous other tools and indicators available for the assessment of agri-food system performance in a holistic sense. So both of these papers together provide a very nice overview of them. For Europe specifically, I think the original agroecological survey and indicator system by Agroecology Europe is a very interesting tool to work with, to start with. For Francophone countries, and I believe an English translation is nearly finalized, also the 𝗁𝗂𝗄𝗄 Guide pour l'évaluation de l'agroecologie is a really meaningful way. They're both rather complex, but they give right to the context specificity and the empowering and participatory nature of agroecology. More fixed tools are FAO's TAPE tool once again. And why this is interesting as a tool is because in a single tool, it combines the assessment of how agroecological something is with SDG-aligned performance indicators, and that then allows for assessing how agroecology contributes to productivity, profitability, income, food security, gender equity, etc., etc. Complementing the TAPE tool, once again, the HOLPA tool does something very similar, but focuses also on the importance of engaging with stakeholders on the ground to assess what matters to them. When we now want to see what evidence looks like from TAPE, this to-date largest study was carried out in Benin, Kenya, Ethiopia, and Madagascar. I had the pleasure of coordinating it, and you can see some of the deriving publications from that. And what we can see from that, and that is the power of a tool like TAPE, is that in a single tool, it combines the agroecologicalness measure with the performance measure. And what we're able to show with that is that contrary to common narratives, more agroecological farms across sub-Saharan Africa are more productive, have higher income, and improve food security and nutrition in addition to the environmental benefits that agroecology produces. But overall, you've seen, even from these just 5 minutes of me talking about it, there's so many different purposes and contexts where we can assess agroecological transitions. And as Nina was saying, silver bullets do not align with agroecology because it is a holistic systems approach that operates and creates benefits on multiple scales. So the choice of tool and indicators depends on where we want to assess the agroecological transition taking place. It does emphasize context specificity and the importance
Just
of local
a short
knowledge.
note, Matthias, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you very much. I'm closing in 2. Super. So it's really important that we don't just use a single tool and think this can measure everything that matters. Engaging with the local context and the local culture and the local people is critical. And co-creation of knowledge is central to agroecology. So just using a single tool to assess all agroecological transitions does not do justice to that. We from the Agroecology TPP therefore propose 3 main options. If you feel for your purpose, a ready-made tool does exactly what you want to do, don't reinvent the wheel, use it. But make sure you look at the tool beforehand so you don't end up with data that isn't useful for you. Of course, you can also use an existing tool and say, yeah, that's a close fit, but not exactly what I want. So there's the opportunity of customizing some of them. And there's the option of just designing your own assessment tool. But that usually is a lot of work. And this is where the Transitions Metrics project, the flagship project of the metrics domain of the TPP, comes in, because we've reviewed over 10,000 metrics for agri-food system performance across different scales. Together with Dave Mills from 𝗵𝗏, who I've seen is in the call. Hi, Dave. We've created a database or library of these metrics that allows people to choose what is the right thing for measure to them and basically put your own assessment framework together. We're currently finalizing checklists for commonly used tools, including the ones I've presented before, so you can go through and see, does that match my purpose? And we've developed some decision support tools, basically, particularly the meta framework, as we refer to it, that through 8 principles and 10 steps, guides metrics users to critical questions that are important before we choose metrics, and then together with the library allows for really assessing what matters to you for your context. And we're very happy to provide support on demand through workshops and guidance materials. So with this, I hope I just managed to stay in time, and I'm really looking forward to the conversation. Thanks a lot, everyone.
Thank you very much, Matthias. I hope you can also see the many clapping hands that are there on the screen. Thank you very much, both Nina and Matthias, for your great talks. The discussion in the chat has also started quite actively. So in case you want to post a question there, please go ahead. You can also just raise your hand and we will give you a possibility to talk. I have 1 to 2 questions that came already before. I think this first one can be for both of you, and then we take a question from 𝗁𝗿𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀 after this. So the first question: there is a strong attempt by organic farming organizations to claim interpretive authority over agroecological farming systems. Many of the living labs funded through research projects under the European Partnership are in fact certified organic farms. From my perspective, however, organic farming standards violate several principles of agroecology, mainly because organic farming regulations only partially make use of the potential of innovations. How do you assess this situation? a question from Urs Nigli.
Matthias, I'm going, yeah?
Please go. Yes.
Yeah. So thanks for saying that. I feel that you are right. I'm not sure if I would say that organic principles violate agroecology, but we will need to go back to those original principles, those 4 original organic principles that are, I can't remember, but that also involve care of people. So care of soil, and I can't remember but they are 4 key principles that actually I think are really aligned with agroecology. And so I feel the let's say the tension sits more between the industrialized model, which can very well be also organic, right? And the more ecological or model, the agroecological model. And I'm sure, I know for a fact that some organic farms, some biodynamic farms very much are agroecological farms. But it's of course also possible for many of them not to be at all. And so that tension is less between agroecology and organic and more between those different interpretations of each. That's my view of it.
Thank you. Would you like to add something to that?
No, I've basically nothing to add to that. I'm a bit surprised, Urs, that this comment comes from you, because I really think it's difficult to say that organic agriculture violates principles of agroecology. It depends on how organic agriculture is practiced. For me, much of what people perceive as agroecology is also organic, but not all. And a lot of organic agriculture is at least partially agroecological, but not by definition. And I fully agree with you, Nina. The 4 key principles of Organic 3.0 are very agroecological in nature.
Yeah, a question is not from me, was sent to us. Thank you so much. We can go further to a question from 𝗁𝗿𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀
or not. So identify myself. Hi, that's all. Then I close it. Okay, good. Now look, it's more a comment. I'm an agricultural educationist. So I hear a lot here about it's all holistic. And then you are talking about assessment, where assessment in a holistic system is one part. Agroecology, then you have Demeter, you have organics, you have European organic standards. My point here is what I'm observing in the vocational education and training, and maybe because Nina is setting up a framework here. What I observe there in the vocational education and training sector, and agriculture falls under that, of course, heavily. The point is, there are so many lay people involved at EU level. We have 27 member countries, and we have almost 27 different vocational education and training systems in agriculture. With a result, now cross-industry sectors, that youth unemployment is there, the lack of the adequate trained people is there. So my advice here is that this, let's say, negative experience should be considered when we are open up new fronts in other areas, other spheres, that we do not end up in the same, let's say, problematic, because we have only the EU 27. We need to stay competitive. We need to have the skills. And my point is that what you say here very much fits also that picture, that we have to have a common understanding first, where we want to go, how do we want to achieve that, and then we can break it down also to assessment. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Matthias and Nina, would you like to comment?
Not really.
No, that's fine. Yeah, I think it was a valid point.
Okay, good. Carla, would you like to take one of the questions in the chat?
Yes. Thank you for your presentations. Are very, very, very well. We have one question that is very pertinent, and also I want to complement that. Is the clarity between practical versus transformative transition elements. So how we can in practice distinguish the greenwashed than that is used in business as usual than the really agroecological transformation. And what is the role of the non-negotiables and the red flags playing that distinction? So in practice, how to implement that? Is for Nina this question.
I'm so sorry. Can you just repeat that once again, just really briefly?
The clarity between the practical versus transformative transition elements. How the role of red flags in that distinction of the practical versus transformative.
Okay, thank you so much for that question. So I think what the red flags do is really protect the version of agroecology that in a way we already have through the principles, but it's through the 13 principles, but it's to protect that from being watered down, from being used in context where it's just a form of greenwashing, right? To say agroecology. I mean, terms can be used by anyone for any kind of end. So in order to protect that, the red flags do that. They kind of insist on a more radical interpretation of agroecology. And thereby, they don't actually say what transformative is. They just say what is definitely not even agroecology on the very basic level, because that is also an important element to do. But the red flags themselves don't do the difference between, let's say, a more technical approach and a more transformative approach. I hope that helped.
Okay. So another question is if you find existing agroecological assessments are generally well accounted for different modes of production, extending to fisheries and aquaculture and also pastoralism, for example. That is a question from 𝗁𝗊, Family Farming Knowledge Platform.
I definitely think that there's room for improvement. Now, I do want to say that the framework that me and Matthias worked on, and Matthias will know better about the other frameworks, but that one makes a little bit of space for those different, let's say, food systems, if you want, by allowing for the adding of relevant, let's say, indicators. So it allows for using judgments that are informed by, let's say, pastoralism in order to place your assessment or to make your final assessment. But I think there is absolutely room for improvement, and I think the 13 principles are very much focused on what is an agrarian paradigm rather than a pastoralist one.
Yeah,
thank you.
Fully agree with Nina. If I may.
Yes, of course.
I think that is a really critical question. And I think it's not just the 13 principles, it's not just the existing assessment tools, it's agroecology as such has an excessive crop agrarian focus. And there is efforts on the way. You may have seen that early last year, a paper was published in Nature to reflect upon the better integration of aquatic foods and water management in the 13 principles and agroecology in general. And currently we're working on doing something similar, not refining the principles, but considering how livestock, pastoralist systems, etc., can be better integrated in agroecology. And indeed, also the most commonly used agroecology assessment tools have that bias towards crop production systems. And there, what Nina was mentioning is, I think, really critical. The more room for contextualization tools give, the better they are able to reflect these different food production and agri-food systems, more generally speaking.
Thank you. We can take a couple of questions in person. Hebri Sanda, you've raised your hand.
Good morning. Good morning.
Yes.
Hello.
Hello.
Okay, I am 𝗁𝗍𝘀𝗂𝗧. I'm Dr. 𝗁𝗍𝘀𝗧, agroecology in University of Yaoundé 1, Cameroon. I want to know, my question is how to monitoring and evaluate the impact of the agroecological transition, the method. We have it. Hello?
Yeah, hello. So how
Yes.
to measure transition?
Yes, I say that how to monitoring how to monitor and evaluate the impact of the agroecological transition.
Okay. Yes, good. I think this question probably also goes for both, if I understand
maybe I
correctly.
can give it a maybe I can give it a first go, 𝗂𝗍𝗀𝗄. Thanks a lot for your question. I think that was the main focus of my presentation, that there's not a single way of doing that. And it really depends on at what level you would like to assess the transition. Is it a farm level transition, a landscape level transition, a whole food system transition? What are you particularly interested in terms of correlating activities with impacts, and what are the impacts that you particularly care about? And that's precisely why we've developed these decision support tools to engage with colleagues like you to find out for your purpose what is the right way of measuring the impact of an agroecological transition, because I absolutely believe there's no silver bullet solution for doing that.
Okay, thank you for your answer.
Thank you, 𝗂𝗍𝗀𝗄. Next one raising her hand is Anne Doan.
Yeah, hello. Do you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I'm Anne van Doorn. I'm working at task 5.3 of the European Partnership on monitoring agroecology. So very nice to hear these presentations. Where I'm struggling with is I understand very well this holistic aspect of agroecology and to monitor it also holistically. But it's also very data consuming, of course, because it's 13 principles, and for each principle you need like maybe 1 or 2 or 3 indicators. And especially if you want to do it not with self-evaluation, but really with data underlying, which are reliable, then it gets really data consuming, and especially if we want to upscale agroecology. So my question for you, and it can be both for Nina and for Matthias, is how do you see this trade-off between being holistic and context specific for a complex system and monitoring like not with too heavy data consumption? Because if it gets too many data and which should be reliable, then I think there will be problems with the practical implementation and the use.
Nina, do you want to go first? Anne and I had the pleasure of talking about this topic not so long ago.
Okay, yes, sure. Thanks, Anne. Obviously, this is a really important question, right? And it's been, and I think it's for all of the tools that I know exist, it's always been one of the criticisms, let's say, that it's just, oh, it's so like difficult to do, and we need to think about all these things, and there's 13 principles and so forth. My personal reaction to it is that it is a systems transformation, and these are complex systems, and it's just very difficult, and we will not be able to not be reductionistic if we sort of save on that side. Now, I wonder whether in processes that are longer term and ongoing, and I'm taking it like maybe in work package 5 of the Agroecology Partnership, right? There is a possibility to do something like a more kind of complex assessment, or at least a kind of conversation about that. And then once right? Or have this kind of conceptual clarification that we were talking about, and like a real understanding before then deciding on, you know, much fewer indicators, you know, much more easy to to generate data for, and then do that as a kind of monitoring tool. I think part of the problem is that if we're only going to, how can we do this practically best? It's so complicated, and then don't go for the complicated, that what we're losing out on is this learning moment, this understanding and this adjusting and this real realization, what it actually means to do a paradigm shift. Because that's not going to be something that is going to be easy to measure, right? And like even easy to do. So, so there is a trade-off between those two. But my feeling is that we need to live with that, and we need to somehow juggle that in practice, and literally potentially go back and forth between more complex approaches and conversations, and then more simple indicators. And when we have had the more complex conversation, we can also realize that the simple indicators are not actually what they are a proxy for, you know, but they are also limited. And that kind of reflection on the data limitation can then come in a stronger way. It's not a really satisfactory answer maybe, but that's what I think.
Thank you, Nina.
That the satisfactory answer you will also not get from me, Anna, as we've previously discussed. I don't think an answer per se exists to that question, because just like Nina, I would all encourage us to embrace complexity and not shy away from it. But we need to balance complexity and being holistic with also being efficient, being mindful of people's time, not collecting amounts of data that we cannot analyze and process, etc. So one of the principles that we do have in the meta framework is less is more. And I think what is critical is that before we collect data, we prioritize and we reflect very carefully, what is it that really matters to me? And not just run out and collect large amounts of data, and then we're stuck with a pile that we can't really work with. And I do think that technological advances are helpful in this regard. I mean, with geospatial technologies, we can now have overview and track changes over time of many factors that 10 years ago, we all had to go into the field to collect the data for. So that allows us to dedicate the time that we spend for data collection in the field to spend more meaningfully on more qualitative aspects, and also those hard to measure things that Nina was referring to earlier.
Thank you both. I hope this gave an answer to Anne. It's a very complex issue and very context specific. We unfortunately running out of time, so I would suggest we take one last question from the chat. And I've seen both Matthias and Nina have written in the chat that you are welcome to reach out with your questions even after the conversation. If you haven't got the answer to your specific question, please reach out to Matthias and Nina afterwards. They will be happy to answer you. And just as a comment, the conversations are also going to build a community on the agroecology TPP communities. We are in the process of doing that, and that will also allow us a space, a possibility where we can get more interactive. So we will save the chat, and we'll go through possibilities how we, for example, can put some of the links on our conversation page. So please be a bit patient with us. We are in progress trying to make our communication more interactive as well. But Carla, would you like to take one last question from the chat?
The last one is the question related with the whole system methods for measuring production from diversified agroecological systems. So what how we can balance the context-specific agroecological assessments with the need for the globally comparable indicators. How we can manage that?
Tough question to end with. Nina, do you want to go first, or would you like me
No,
to?
I would love you to go first.
Yeah, I think that is a very, very challenging question, and that's at the challenge of many of the things like the engagements we have with diverse partners. Because yes, data interoperability, I can't even pronounce the word, and harmonization and having global data sets matters a lot. And context specificity is critical to agroecology, and we just know that agriculture depends on context. You can't just compare apples with pears. So there's not a single solution for that. In some tools, we've tried to combine global indicators with context-specific indicators, 𝗁𝗲𝗀𝗃 being a good example. In other cases, we use existing tools and then contextualize them. In other cases, we just design tools for a specific context and purpose and then try to harmonize the data afterwards. We need to find out as we go along. I think it's a journey, but yes, I'd love to continue exactly that conversation.
Great, nothing to add.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I would like to say a big thank you for both Nina and Matthias for excellent talks, for all of you for participating. This is an all-time high of participants. We are quite thrilled here. So thank you so much. Thank you especially for Julia, Monica, and Carla for co-moderating and for our whole task group of initiating these events. Next time we will meet at the end of February. We will focus on key factors for business models in agroecology living labs and research infrastructures. We'll get presentations from Gerald Schwarz and José Manuel 𝗵𝗂𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀 comments, wishes, please feel free to reach out to us. And if you still want to ask questions from Nina and Matthias, their email is open for questions. Thank you very much for today and looking forward to see you next month.
Thanks a lot as well from me, and thanks a lot for organizing, Taru.
Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Taru, Carla, colleagues, Nina. Been very
Thank you,
nice.
Matthias.